The Illuminated Order, Secrets of Power in America, written by T.M. Jefferson. Copyright 2024, T. Jefferson, TMJ Books, all rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced in any form or by any electronic or mechanical means, including information storage and retrieval systems, without written permission from the author, except for the use of brief quotations in a book review. This novel's story and characters are fictitious. Certain long-standing institutions, agencies, and public offices are mentioned, but the characters involved are wholly imaginary. Warning: the information in this book can potentially get me into some trouble, but something inside of me is urging to enlighten. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't expose this information. This message is a warning. The content in this book will have you questioning everything and everyone around you. But let me tell you this. There is no greater power than God, and once you have belief in a higher power, your fear will subside. Prologue. London, 1888. Lord Alexander Hawthorne presided over the ornate mahogany table like a king holding court, his fingers caressing the intricate carvings, as if they held secrets of the universe within their grooves. The soft shimmer of the gaslight cast an ethereal glow on the grand library, the flames forming silhouettes that whispered secrets of their own. He carried the burden of centuries, the legacy of the Illuminated Order streaming through his veins like an ancient river. "My esteemed colleagues," he began, his voice a rich baritone that commanded attention. "For centuries, we have worked tirelessly to guide the course of human history." The words tasted like honey on his tongue, sweet with the promise of power and control. He savored each syllable, letting them linger in the air like a fine wine. "Let us reflect upon the foundations of our order, the principles that have guided us through the centuries and shaped our destiny." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. It was in the year 1534 that a great man, Ignatius of Loyola, founded the Society of Jesus, the Jesuit order. His vision, his commitment to the cause, and his mastery of the arts of influence and persuasion laid the groundwork for what would one day become the Illuminated Order. He leaned forward, his eyes intense with fervor. It was through the study and application of Jesuit practices that the founders of the Illuminated Order first conceived of our great work. They saw in the Jesuits a path to power, a means to shape the world to their will, and they seized upon it with a fierce determination that continues to drive us to this very day. Lord Hawthorne continued, "Like the Jesuits, we must be willing to adapt to changing circumstances, to use whatever means necessary to achieve our goals. We must be patient, methodical, and above all, ruthless in our pursuance of power." Around the table, the faces of his fellow members shone with the same fierce determination that burned within his own heart. Lady Amelia Sinclair, her emerald eyes sparkling with a keen intelligence that rivaled his own. Sir Edward Blackwell, his weathered face a map of the battles he'd fought and won in service to the Order. These were the titans of their age, the true masters of the world, and he was proud to stand among them. As he spoke, his mind drifted to their most recent triumph, the selection of a president who would dance to their tune like a marionette on a string. The memory brought a smile to his lips, a rush that set his heart racing. It was confirmation of their influence, their ability to shape the fabric of reality to their will. The future stretched out before them, a canvas of infinite possibility waiting to be painted in the colors of their design. With each passing moment, he could feel the Order's power snaking out across the globe, infiltrating every corner of society like an invisible web. It was a heady sensation, a rush of adrenaline that left him feeling invincible. He turned to the window, the fog-shrouded streets of London beckoning him like a siren's call. The world beyond these walls was a chessboard, and he the grandmaster moving the pieces with an invisible hand. The masses were pawns, ignorant of the true power that guided their lives, but he and his brethren knew the truth. As he lost himself in visions of the future, the weight of destiny settled upon his shoulders like a mantle of power. The Illuminated Order had shaped the course of human history for centuries, and he would be damned if he let that legacy falter on his watch. The world would kneel before them, a grateful and obedient servant to the true masters of mankind's destiny. The soft clearing of a throat jolted him back to the present, and he turned to see Lady Amelia watching him with a knowing smile. "The future is ours, Lord Hawthorne," she said, her voice a silken purr that sent shivers down his spine. "The world will tremble before the might of the Illuminated Order." Lord Alexander nodded, a fierce grin spreading across his face. "And tremble it shall, my dear Lady Sinclair. Tremble it shall." As the meeting adjourned and the members of the Order dispersed into the night, Lord Alexander Hawthorne was standing on the precipice of something momentous. The world was changing, the old order crumbling away like dust in the wind, and the Illuminated Order would be there to pick up the pieces and reshape them in their image. He smiled, a cold and ruthless expression that would have made even the bravest of men quail in terror. The future was theirs, and he would stop at nothing to ensure that it was a future forged in the fires of their ambition. The Illuminated Order would reign supreme, and all who dared to stand in their way would be crushed beneath the wheels of their irrevocable march towards destiny. Chapter 1. Washington, D.C., 2023. Jade sat in the living room of her cramped studio apartment. The only sound, the faint hum of the ceiling fan overhead. The blue glow of the computer monitor cast a pallid light across her intense expression, reflecting in the lenses of her black-rimmed glasses. She leaned forward, elbows resting on the cluttered desk as her eyes scanned the message on the screen. Her fingers trembled over the keyboard, nails bitten to the quick in restless anticipation. The message contained references to a secret society known as the Illuminated Order, operating unseen in Washington, D.C. It was an invitation to pierce the veil and expose their hidden influence. Her pulse quickened as she reread the words. The stuffy apartment air seemed to stand still in the suspense of the moment. Outside, the sounds of traffic whirred as the city continued on, oblivious to the tempting proposition weighing on Jade's shoulders. She reached for her mug, the dregs of coffee long cold, and took a sip to steady her nerves. She leaned back in the creaking desk chair, eyes still fixed on the screen as she contemplated her next move. This was the break she'd been waiting for, a chance to blow the doors off a story that could shake the foundations of power in Washington. The thrill of the hunt coursed through her veins, even as the hint of danger whispered caution. The cursor blinked, as if counting down the seconds until her decision. Jade's silhouette reflected back from the screen's surface, merging with the message that represented a threshold she couldn't return from. With a deep breath, she leaned forward again, fingers suspended over the keys before beginning to type out a response that would launch her into the unknown. Jade stepped into Dr. Soros's penthouse office, her eyes drawn to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline. The room itself was a testament to the woman's brilliance and eclectic tastes. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with an array of scientific journals and philosophical texts. A wooden desk stood at the center, its surface adorned with a carefully curated selection of artifacts from various historical periods. As Jade settled into the plush armchair opposite Dr. Soros, she was overcome by a sense of awe. The older woman's presence filled the room, her intellect, visible in every carefully chosen detail of her surroundings. From the intricate tapestries depicting the great thinkers of history to the gleaming chess set resting on a side table, every element spoke to a mind that reveled in the complexities of the world. Dr. Soros was an imposing woman, her silver hair perfectly coiffed and her tailored suit exuding an air of power and authority. As she began to speak, Jade found herself drawn into a world of arcane knowledge and philosophical musings. "Life, my dear," Dr. Soros began, her eyes shining with a mixture of wisdom and mischief, "is a game. A grand, cosmic chess match played out across the eons." She rose from her chair, moving to stand before the crackling fireplace. "From the moment we're born, we're thrust into this game, our moves dictated by forces beyond our control. Our families, our circumstances, the very blood that flows through our veins. All of these things shape the board on which we play." Jade frowned. "But what about free will? The ability to choose our own paths, to make our own decisions?" Dr. Soros smiled. "What do you believe about free will, Jade?" Jade hesitated, caught off guard by the question. I guess I've always thought that we have the power to make our own choices, to shape our own destinies. Ah, but what if I told you that free will is nothing more than an illusion? A comforting lie we tell ourselves to make sense of the chaos around us? Jade frowned. What do you mean? Dr. Soros's stare intensified, her voice getting lower. The truth, my dear, is that we're all slaves to the game of power, of influence, of control. It's been played since the dawn of civilization, and it will continue long after we're gone. But that sounds so bleak, so hopeless, Jade said. Are you saying that we have no control over our own lives? On the contrary, Dr. Soros said, her eyes sparkling with an intensity that made Jade feel exhilarated and terrified. There are some who have learned to rise above the game, to seize control and bend the world to their will. But it takes knowledge, cunning, and the willingness to do what others cannot. Jade sat back, her mind reeling. Just how deep does this rabbit hole go, Dr. Soros? The older woman smiled, her expression equal parts inviting and unsettling. Deeper than you can possibly imagine, Jade. And if you're brave enough, I can show you just how far it goes. Dr. Soros was a legend in the medical community, a brilliant researcher and philanthropist who dedicated her life to improving the lives of others. She was a mentor to Jade's mother for years, guiding her through the challenges of dental school and helping her establish her thriving practice. Your mother is one of the most talented dentists I've ever known, Dr. Soros said, her voice warm with affection. She has a gift for healing, for making people feel safe and cared for, and that's something that can't be taught. A swell of pride filled Jade's chest, a deep, abiding love for the woman who raised her and shaped her into the person she was today. Her mother had always been her hero, a shining example of compassion and dedication in a world that often seemed cold and indifferent. I remember when your mother first came to me, Dr. Soros continued, her eyes distant with memory. She was just a young student then, full of passion and idealism. She wanted to change the world, to make a difference in people's lives. Jade hung on every word. She heard this story before, but it never failed to inspire her, to fill her with a sense of awe and reverence for the two women who shaped her life in such profound ways. I knew from the moment I met her she was special, Dr. Soros said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She had a fire in her, a drive to succeed that I had never seen before. And so, I took her under my wing, showed her the ropes, and helped her navigate the challenges of the medical world. A lump formed in Jade's throat, a deep, overwhelming sense of gratitude for the woman who was such an important part of her family's life. She knew her mother's success, her ability to touch so many lives and make a real difference in the world, was due in no small part to the guidance and support of Dr. Evelyn Soros. I've learned so much from both of you, Jade said. You've shown me what it means to be strong, to be compassionate, to fight for what you believe in. And I hope that someday, I can make you both proud, can carry on the work you've started. Dr. Soros reached out, taking Jade's hand in her own. Her skin was soft and warm, her grip strong and reassuring. You already have, my dear, she said. You have a bright future ahead of you. And I know whatever path you choose, whatever challenges you face, you'll meet them with the same strength and determination that your mother has always shown. A tear slipped down Jade's cheek, a sense of love and gratitude washing over her. She'd always known she was lucky, that she was blessed with two incredible women to guide and support her through life's obstacles. But now, sitting in Dr. Soros's penthouse, surrounded by the love and wisdom, Jade felt a sense of purpose, a conviction that she was meant for something great. She would make them proud, would carry on the legacy of compassion and dedication they instilled in her from the beginning. And she would do it with the same strength, the same commitment to justice and truth, that had always been the hallmark of Dr. Evelyn Soros and her beloved mother. The rain-streaked hallways of Harvard's Merrill Academic Building carried the ripple of Jade's purposeful strides. Though she tried to temper her excitement, she couldn't resist the swell of pride as her fingers traced the inscription carved into the plaque. Jade Rose, valedictorian, class of 2012. In that moment, The years of countless all-nighters, the relentless drive to outwork and outthink her privileged peers, all led to this crowning achievement. The sacrifices made sense as she reflected on her arduous journey from the quiet suburban streets of New Rochelle, New York, to these hallowed halls. Jade's mind flashed back to her first day as a wide-eyed freshman, awestruck by the legacy surrounding her. The intimidation of ivy-covered buildings and students clad in tidy prep school blazers lingered, until she found her calling in Professor Woodson's investigative journalism seminar. His lectures on seeking truth, remaining objective but impassioned in pursuit of justice, activated a ferocious passion within the scholarship student. Woodson's war stories of confronting corruption through intrepid reporting field research inspired Jade. She'd found her life's purpose. From that point, she pursued every extracurricular avenue to hone her craft, pushing herself to be editor-in-chief of the Harvard Crimson by her junior year, finagling opportunities for one-on-one workshops with guest speakers like famed journalists Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, and even convincing the dean to approve an independent study embedded with the AP in the Middle East conflict zones one summer. Each experience galvanized her obsessive hunger for uncovering vital stories that held the powerful accountable. While her classmates partied at debutante balls and schmoozed for corporate jobs, Jade spent her nights devouring microfiche archives and shadowing local beat reporters. Her tenacity carved a solitary path, but it soon paid off with a prestigious Soros Fellowship to launch her career after graduating as class valedictorian. With her diploma in hand, a profound sense of responsibility weighed on her shoulders. Having received an elite education, Jade now carried a moral obligation to use her work as a platform to advocate for the voiceless, propelling her forward with renewed determination. Over the years since graduating from Harvard, Jade carved out a reputation by exposing scandal after scandal that the powerful tried to keep hidden. There was her Pulitzer-nominated bombshell about defense contractors exploiting a legal loophole to import cheap metals tainted with carcinogens for military gear. Despite intense pressure from lobbyists, her months-long investigation forced several CEOs to resign in disgrace. Her pursuit of the Panamayan money laundering operation that toppled 3 senators and crippled an international banking syndicate read like a John le Carré thriller. Jade spent weeks holed up in a dingy Panama City hostel, intercepting encrypted communications to unravel the sordid web. Then there was the Washington, D.C. punk rock club that doubled as a front for underground Russian cybercrime forums she infiltrated. Going undercover as a South American heiress, slumming as a groupie, she documented vast networks of identity theft, until narrowly escaping a biker gang intent on silencing her. Each situation more hazardous than the last, but Jade remained dedicated in her mission to peel back every layer of deception, no matter how deeply embedded in the power structures. Her apartment was a ramshackled chronicle of her crusades, FOIA requests and lawsuits stacked haphazardly, covered in scrawled notes like, "Don't trust anyone," and "They're watching." Burner phones filled shoeboxes, fake IDs and wigs stuffed in the air vents, all tools of her escalating tradecraft. On the wall remained the solitary memorial to what set her on this uncompromising path, a ripped photograph in a frame of her 6-year-old baby cousin, smiling beside a tricycle, before his life was tragically taken in a hit-and-run incident. Jade was still enraged that the cover-up implicated city officials taking bribes to protect the culprit, a wealthy elite's son. That defining moment crystallized her life's purpose: to give a voice to those systemically wronged or silenced by abuses of authority. It was the reason Yale's Poynter Fellowship and Peabody Award sat collecting dust in her closet. Abstract accolades meant little compared to the impact of her work dismantling injustice. Chapter 2. As the mysterious summons lit her laptop screen, Jade's heart raced, pounding against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for release. Her palms grew slick with sweat, and she wiped them nervously on her jeans, her mind spinning with the implications of what she was seeing. This was big, bigger than anything she ever encountered before. A potential puppet master, pulling the strings of power on a global scale. The Illuminated Order, the very name making the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. Jade's breath came faster, her chest rising and falling with each rapid inhale and exhale. Her eyes flashed across the screen, taking in every word, every clue, every hint of the corruption and immorality waiting to be unraveled. In her mind's eye, she could already see it. The cadaverous eyes of the powerful, the ones who thought themselves untouchable, withering under the blinding spotlight of truth. The thrill of the hunt, the exhilaration of the chase, it flowed through her veins like an electric current, setting every nerve ending alight with anticipation. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her journal, flipping it open to a blank page. This was it. The next great challenge. The ultimate test of her skills and her resolve. She could feel it in her bones, in the beating of her heart and the buzzing of her mind. The Illuminated Order was hiding in the shadows, pulling the strings of the world like a puppet master. But she would bring them into the light, expose their darkest secrets and their most heinous crimes. No matter the cost, no matter the danger, she would not rest until the truth was revealed. Jade steadied her breath and glanced around her apartment. The countless awards and honors served as a counterpoint to the maxim that defined her existence. Comfort is the enemy of truth. This latest message heralding the existence of the Illuminated Order was simply the next challenge for her to confront. For Jade, her Harvard pedigree represented the high-minded ideals she'd been forged by, wielding the sanctity of facts to pull back the veil on those illicitly accumulating power. As she stared at her laptop screen, she welcomed the thought that this could be her life's greatest investigation. One transcending Woodward and Bernstein, and cementing her as this generation's most fearless journalistic icon, even if it consumed her in the process. No matter how dark or dangerous the path ahead turned, she was prepared to expose the forces controlling the world order. With her moleskin journal open, Jade wrote down her first impressions and leads to pursue, the fire now stoked for her next lonely crusade. As the cursor blinked on the screen, she found herself in a bind, a choice between the ordinary and the extraordinary. What truths lay hidden behind those cryptic words? The allure of an exposé that could shake the foundations of power battled with the cautionary whispers of the dangers that awaited her. Harvard was a training ground, but it hadn't prepared her for what was unfolding before her. The decision was a difficult one, a choice that could propel her further into the depths of corruption. The pursuit of justice was her guiding force, but this was something different. Jade's eyes moved from the screen to the city outside her window, the heart of Washington, where power brokers and secrets entwined. The walls started closing in as she struggled with the decision that lay in her hands. With a determined breath, she closed her eyes and made the choice that would alter the course of her life forever. She shifted from contemplation to action, the clatter of keys pinging through the room as she began her research, diving into the obscure history of the Illuminated Order. The secrets that eluded others were now hers to uncover. Her journalistic instincts kicked in, and the messy desk became a command center. Red strings connected bits of information on a corkboard, a tangible map of the hidden world she was about to enter. As she sifted through government archives, conspiracy theories, and whistleblower accounts, a web of intrigue spun out before her. She continued to scour the internet for more information, and a single word caught her eye. Grove. It was mentioned in passing, almost as an afterthought, but something about it nagged at her. She made a mental note to investigate further, wondering if this term held any significance in the larger puzzle of the Illuminated Order. The hours melded into the night. The white glow of her computer screen reflected in her eyes, now alight with the anticipation of unveiling the truth. Jade's finger hovered over the send button, the email address staring back at her. She took a deep breath and clicked, watching the message disappear into the digital ether. Less than an hour later, her phone buzzed with a reply. A time and place. No signature, but she knew it was him. Chapter 3. The bar on the outskirts of D.C. was nearly empty when Jade arrived. She spotted him as soon as she walked in, hunched over a whiskey in the back booth. His once clean-cut appearance now obscured by a beard and tired eyes. David. He looked up, surprised. Jade, you look good. Jade slid into the booth, her eyes locked on his. I'm not here to catch up, she said, her tone clipped. David leaned back, his jaw clenching as he studied her. The Illuminated Order, he said, his voice low and rough. Your message said you needed my help. Jade nodded, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. What do you know about them? David scanned the bar, checking for eavesdroppers. He took a long swig of his drink before answering, his voice just above a whisper. More than I ever wanted to. They're not just some conspiracy theory, Jade. They're real. And they're... He paused, his eyes haunted. They're fucking dangerous. A chill crept down her spine. She leaned in closer, her voice urgent. I've been piecing things together, but I keep hitting dead ends. I need someone with insider knowledge, someone who... And you thought of me? David interrupted, a humorless laugh escaping his lips. I'm flattered. Don't be, Jade snapped. You're the only person I know with connections to that world. David studied her, his eyes searching hers. What makes you think I'll help you? He asked. We didn't exactly part on the best of terms, Jade. Jade held his stare, her heart drumming in her chest. You owe me, she said quietly, her voice trembling. And because I think deep down, there's still a part of you that wants to do the right thing. David was silent for a moment as he reached into his jacket. Jade watched him. She thought back to their time together at Harvard, the long nights spent researching and chasing leads. It was the electricity between them, the way his touch sent a surge through her body. But she remembered the pain of his sudden disappearance, the unanswered questions that haunted her for years. As David pulled out the flash drive and slid it across the table, Jade felt a rush of emotions. This was the break she'd been waiting for, the key to unlocking the secrets of the Illuminated Order. But it also meant delving back into a past she tried to leave behind. Memories flashed through her mind unbidden. Late nights in the Harvard Crimson office, the strong smell of coffee and the hum of computers. Stolen kisses in the stacks of the library, the thrill of uncovering secrets together. And then the emptiness followed, the hole in her life that David's absence left. Jade's fingers brushed against his as she took the flash drive, and for a moment, it was as if no time passed at all. She could feel the old connection between them, the pull that had always been there. But they were no longer young students chasing the truth. They were two broken people, scarred by the battles they fought and the secrets they uncovered. Thank you, Jade said. She met David's eyes, seeing the obsessed look that mirrored her own. Don't thank me yet. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. Jade stood to leave, but David reached out, grabbing her wrist. Wait, there's something else you should know. She looked down at his hand, then back at his face. What? David's eyes were intense, pleading. The Order. They're everywhere. In the government, in corporations, in the media, and they'll stop at nothing to protect their secrets. Jade pulled her arm away, her heart pounding. I'm not afraid of them. You should be, David said, his voice low. You need to be careful. Trust no one. Jade stared at him before turning to leave. As she pushed through the door, the cold night air hit her like a blast, chilling her to the bone. The street was empty, save for a few shadows on the pavement from the streetlights. She pulled her coat tighter around herself, David's words replaying in her mind. The Order was everywhere, their influence far-reaching and insidious. The task was daunting, almost insurmountable. But beneath the fear and uncertainty, there was something else. Something that pushed her to continue. Determination. Jade dedicated her life to uncovering the truth, to exposing the corruption that lurked in the shadows of power. And now, with David's help, she finally had a chance to do just that. With a deep breath, she squared her shoulders and continued walking, her steps filled with purpose. She would unravel the secrets of the Illuminated Order, no matter the cost. And maybe, just maybe, she and David could find a way to trust each other again, to heal the wounds of the past, and forge a new partnership in the face of this daunting challenge. Inside his townhouse, David Montgomery sat at his kitchen table, a glass of whiskey in one hand and a tattered photograph in the other. The face staring back at him was barely recognizable, a younger, cleaner-cut version of himself in a crisp military uniform. David's fingers traced the edge of the picture, his mind drifting to a time when he believed in the idea of serving a greater good. But that was before. before the CIA, before he crossed the lines between right and wrong, before the Illuminated Order. In the scorching heat of Kandahar, Afghanistan, David Montgomery moved through the dusty streets, his mind a fractured maze of memories and half-formed thoughts. The effects of the MK Ultra program had taken hold, stripping away his sense of self and replacing it with a singular, all-consuming purpose: to track down and eliminate the high priest of the ancient cult that threatened the fragile balance of power in the region. The city was filled with narrow alleys and crowded bazaars, the air suffused with the scent of spices and the clamor of daily life. The sun beat down from a cloudless sky, emitting shadows across the crumbling mud-brick buildings and the faces of the people who called this place home. David's routine was a cycle of surveillance and preparation, his every waking moment consumed by the task at hand. He rose before dawn each morning, his body conditioned by years of rigorous training and the chemical enhancements that flowed through his veins. He moved through the streets like a wraith, his eyes scanning for any sign of his target or the threat of danger. He spent long hours sitting on rooftops and crouched in alleyways, his eyes trained on the high priest's compound. He studied the comings and goings of the guards, memorized the patterns of their patrols and the layout of the buildings. In the afternoons, when the heat was at its most oppressive, David retreated to the dingy room he rented on the outskirts of the city. The space was Spartan and cramped, with little more than a cot and a few basic amenities to serve his needs. But it was here that he planned and prepared. He pored over maps and satellite images. He cleaned and maintained his weapons, the tools of his trade that had become an extension of his body. In the midst of his focus, the edges of his mind began to fray, the cracks in his psyche widening with each passing hour. The drugs that had been pumped into his system, the mental conditioning and the brutal training, had taken a toll on his sanity, his grasp on reality becoming more tenuous with every breath. At night, when the city was draped in darkness and the sounds of gunfire resounded through the streets, David lay on his cot, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling as he fought to hold on to the last shreds of his humanity. He saw faces in the shadows, heard whispers in the silence, the ghosts of his past and the demons of his present bleeding together in horror and despair. Dressed in tactical gear, David moved through the rugged landscapes of Kandahar. He was a pawn in the CIA's twisted game. Under the influence of psychoactive drugs and subjected to brutal psychological tactics, David transformed into a programmed assassin, a killing machine stripped of moral constraints. As he neared the decrepit temple, the air became stuffy. The high priest, a man of influence among the desperate and dispossessed, had become a thorn in the order's side. His sermons contradicted their crafted lies. Slipping through the darkness, David saw the glow of candles lighting the makeshift altar inside the temple. The high priest's voice could be heard through the night, resonating with the weary souls seeking guidance within the walls. A surge of emotions shot through David's veins. Once a man of conviction, he now operated as a programmed instrument of death. MK Ultra stripped away his autonomy, turning him into a merciless executor of the Order's will. Closing in on his target, David moved with precision. His silenced pistol felt cold against his gloved hand as he approached the temple's entrance. The candlelight revealed the silhouette of the high priest, deep in prayer. Without hesitation, David breached the threshold, his movements a seamless blend of instinct and conditioning. The high priest, sensing an intruder, turned to face the person encroaching on his sacred space, their eyes locked, a moment pregnant with the weight of warring destinies. The high priest's eyes showed fear, while David's, once mirrors to a soul, now reflected the abyss that MK Ultra carved inside of him. "O great and mighty gods, hear my prayer in this dark hour," he said. "For centuries, we have served as your faithful stewards, guiding the course of human history according to your divine will. But now, I fear that we have strayed from the path, that we have allowed our own hubris and ambition to cloud our judgment." He paused, as if struggling to find the right words. "In our quest for power and control, we have forgotten the sacred trust that you have placed in us. We have sought to shape the world in our own image, to bend reality to our will. We have played God, and in doing so, We have brought darkness and suffering on the innocent." The high priest's voice grew louder as he continued. "Forgive us, O gods, for our arrogance and our folly. Forgive us for the lives we have taken, the souls we have corrupted, the chaos we have sown in your name. We are but mortal men, flawed and fallible, and we have let our own desires blind us to the true path." He opened his eyes, his gaze falling on David, who stood before him like an avenging angel, his face hard and his eyes filled with a righteous fury. "And now, the reckoning is upon us," the high priest whispered. "The forces of light have sent their champion to strike us down, to put an end to our misguided crusade. And though it pains me to admit it, I know that we deserve nothing less." He bowed his head, his shoulders slumping as if under a great weight. "So I beseech you, O gods, to have mercy on our souls. Judge us not for our actions, but for the purity of our intentions, and grant us the strength to face our fate with courage and dignity, knowing that we have served your will to the best of our ability." As the high priest finished his prayer, David stepped forward, clutching the weapon at his side. The high priest looked up at him, his eyes filled with sadness and a deep, abiding faith. "Do what you must," he said. "I am ready to face the judgment of the gods, and to accept whatever fate they have ordained for me." In that moment, David's training took over. The silenced pistol spat its deadly payload, extinguishing the life that dared challenge the Order's narrative. The high priest crumpled to the floor, his prayers silenced by the cold efficiency of the assassin. David took a long swig of whiskey, relishing the burn in his throat. He tried to leave that world behind, but the past had a way of catching up with him. He thought back to his and Jade's time together at Harvard, the heated debates, the stolen moments, the shared passion for finding the truth. Jade was a force of nature, and David was drawn to her like a bird to its nest. But he had his own secrets, his own darkness that he couldn't share with her. When the CIA came calling, David saw it as a chance to make a real difference, to serve his country. He left without saying goodbye, knowing Jade would never understand. Now, years later, he was a man haunted by his choices. The things he'd seen, the things he'd done in the name of national security. They clung to his back like a physical burden. David's eyes drifted to the stack of files on the table, the ones he managed to smuggle out of Langley before going off the grid. They were the key to unlocking the secrets of the Illuminated Order, the devilish cabal that had been pulling the strings behind the scenes for longer than anyone realized. Helping Jade would put him back on their radar, paint a target on both their backs. But he couldn't keep running from the truth. With a sigh, he drained the last of his whiskey and stood up, gathering the files and his few belongings. It was time to face his past and join Jade in her fight for justice. As he stepped into the night, David felt something he hadn't felt in years: belief. Belief that maybe he could find a way to atone for his sins and make things right, even if it meant putting his life on the line in the process. Chapter 4. Senator Jonathan Bishop slithered through the corridors of the Capitol, his presence commanding attention and respect. His tailored suit, a perfect blend of elegance and authority, mirrored the persona he presented to the world. As he entered his office, the epitome of power and prestige, he prepared to face the inquisitive journalist who managed to secure an interview. Jade Rose, a determined force in her own right, was prepared to unravel the enigma that was Senator Bishop. As she stepped into his office, the opulence of the surroundings struck her: the rich wooden desk, the plush leather chairs, the intricate artwork on the walls. Yet, beneath the veneer of sophistication, Jade sensed an undercurrent of something more sinister. "Miss Rose, welcome," Senator Bishop greeted her, his smile polished and practiced. "I must say, I'm intrigued by your persistence in securing this meeting." Jade's eyes met his, her smile masking the determination that burned inside of her. "Thank you for taking the time, Senator. I believe our conversation will be enlightening." As they settled into their seats, Jade wasted no time diving into her questions. Each inquiry a calculated probe, designed to pierce through the senator's false image and uncover the truth behind his alleged ties to the Illuminated Order. Senator Bishop, however, was a master of deflection. His responses were smooth and refined, his words chosen with meticulous care. Miss Rose, while I admire your tenacity, I must say that these rumors of secret societies and hidden agendas are nothing more than sensationalism. My sole focus is serving the people who elected me. But Jade was not so easily dissuaded. She pressed on, her questions growing more pointed, more specific. And for a moment, she saw something in the senator's eyes, a speckle of unease, a crack in his impeccable composure. Senator Bishop, with all due respect, the evidence suggests there may be more to your story than meets the eye. The connections, the coincidences, they paint a picture that cannot be ignored. The senator's smile tightened, his eyes hardening. Miss Rose, I understand the allure of a good story, but I assure you, there is no grand conspiracy at play here. I am a public servant, nothing more, nothing less. But as Jade left the senator's office, a sense of unease lingered. The meeting only served to fuel her suspicions, to deepen the mystery surrounding Senator Bishop and his potential involvement with the Illuminated Order. As she stepped out into the corridors of the Capitol, Jade understood this was just the beginning. The senator's persona was a mask, concealing secrets she was determined to uncover. And she would stop at nothing to bring the truth to the light. Senator Jonathan Bishop stormed out of his office, his face twisted with rage and his eyes blazing with fury. He slammed the door behind him with such force that the walls shook, causing his staff to jump in alarm. "Who the hell was that journalist?" he asked. "How did she get past security? And why the fuck wasn't I briefed on her before the meeting?" His chief of staff, a thin, nervous-looking man named Eric, stepped forward, his hands trembling as he tried to placate his boss. "Sir, we had no idea she would be here. She must have used a fake identity to get through the screening process." Bishop whirled on him, his eyes narrowing to slits. "I don't want excuses, Eric. I want answers. Who is this Jade Rose, and why is she sniffing around my business?" Eric unfastened the top button of his shirt and swallowed hard. "I'm not sure, sir. We're still trying to gather information on her background and connections." Bishop slammed his fist on his desk. "Well, you better find out fast, because if that little bitch keeps digging, she's going to uncover things that could bring us all down." He began to pace back and forth, thinking back on Jade's questions. She was well informed, too sharp in her inquiries. It was clear she knew something, or at least suspected something, about his dealings with the Illuminated Order. "I want a full dossier on her by the end of the day," he said, his voice cutting through the tense silence of the room. "I want to know everything about her, her family, her friends, her fucking kindergarten teacher. And I want to know who she's been talking to and what she knows." His staff nodded, their faces pale with fear and apprehension. When the senator was in this mood, there was no room for error or delay. Bishop turned to face the window, his hands clasped behind his back and his jaw clenched tight. He worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let some upstart journalist bring him down. He clawed his way to the top of the political heap, made the deals and compromises necessary to secure his place in the halls of power. And he'd done it all with the backing of the Illuminated Order. They funded his campaigns, pulled the strings to ensure his victory, and in return, he was their loyal servant, their man on the inside. But now, with Jade Rose sniffing around and asking dangerous questions, everything he built was at risk. If she kept digging, kept pulling at the threads of the web that bound him to the Order, it could all come crashing down around him. He couldn't let that happen. He wouldn't let that happen. He was Senator Jonathan Bishop, and he would crush anyone who dared to stand in his way. "Find out everything you can about this Jade Rose," he said, "and then we'll figure out how to deal with her, permanently." Chapter 5. Jade and David entered the archive, a sanctuary of secrets tucked away in the heart of Washington. It was a stately edifice that exuded an air of history and knowledge. The building's exterior was crafted from smooth limestone, adorned with intricate carvings and columns that harkened back to the neoclassical architecture of the city's founding. The familiar scent of aged paper filled the air, transporting them back to their history of uncovering hidden truths. Shelves lined with dusty volumes reached toward the ceiling, each one a testament to the depth of knowledge waiting to be unraveled. As they searched the cataloged records, David's fingers traced the spines with a practiced ease. Jade admired his focus, remembering the countless late nights they'd spent together, poring over documents in pursuit of a story. She glanced at him, an inkling of their past sparking in her chest. Just like old times, huh? David's eyes met hers, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. Some things never change. They fell into a rhythm, their movements synchronized by the connection that never faded. Jade's heart skipped a beat as she read the headline of an old newspaper. Illuminated Order, linked to secret society, gathering at Bohemian Grove. The article was dated back to the 1920s, but the implications were clear. David, look at this. As he read the words, his brow furrowed. That's where they meet. It's not the first time the Order's been connected to Bohemian Grove, she said. This goes back decades, maybe even longer. This could be the key to exposing their secrets. David's hand brushed against hers as he took the newspaper. His fingers lingered for a moment, the warmth of his skin seeping into hers, before he pulled away, his eyes scanning the pages with a practiced intensity. We're treading on thin ice here. One misstep, and the entire operation could collapse, taking us down with it. Jade met David's eyes, seeing the determination that drew her to him. In that moment, the past and present collided, their mission reigniting the bond they once shared. They gathered the pertinent documents, and as they stepped into the sunlight, Jade felt a renewed sense of purpose, fueled by the knowledge that she and David were once again fighting side by side. The ghosts of their past led them to this moment, and together, they were ready to face whatever lay ahead. The autumn breeze whispered through the ancient trees that adorned Harvard Yard, carrying with it the fragrance of knowledge and the promise of intellectual pursuits. Jade Rose, a tenacious journalist with a thirst for truth, navigated the maze of books and students with a focused determination. Her eyes, sharp and discerning, scanned the crowd for any hint of the mysteries she sought to unveil. Meanwhile, David Montgomery, a man with an air of quiet intensity, stood near the steps of Widener Library. His eyes swept over the academic landscape. The world seemed to fade into the background as he delved into his own thoughts, an island of introspection amidst the sea of academia. Their first encounter was as unexpected as it was inevitable. In the shadow of John Harvard's statue, a symbolic guardian of knowledge, Jade and David's worlds collided, a collision of books and papers orchestrated by the hand of destiny. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Jade said. "No harm done," he replied. Jade, with her insatiable curiosity, couldn't resist the opportunity. "Are you lost in thought, or is this just the usual Harvard contemplation pose?" David laughed. "Perhaps a bit of both," he admitted. The ice broke, their dialogue flowed, weaving through topics ranging from literature to the complexities of life. Each word exchanged revealed layers of their personalities, creating an invisible bond that transcended the ordinary. Little did they know that this chance meeting, bathed in the golden hues of a Harvard evening, would mark the beginning of an odyssey into the shadows of mystery and intrigue. Chapter 6. Councilman Michael Thornton's entanglement with the Illuminated Order began early in his political career. As a young, ambitious politician, Thornton caught the eye of the Order's recruiters, who saw in him a malleable and willing pawn to further their interests in the halls of power. Thornton's rise through the ranks of DC politics was swift and explosive, fueled by the Order's influence and the considerable financial backing they provided. Behind the scenes, the Order pulled strings and called in favors, ensuring that Thornton's opponents were neutralized and his path to victory was all but assured. In return for their support, Thornton became a loyal servant of the Order, using his position on the city council to advance their agenda and protect their interests. He worked tirelessly to steer lucrative contracts and development deals to companies with ties to the Order, lining his own pockets in the process with kickbacks and bribes. As Thornton's power and influence grew, so too did his corruption. He became involved in illicit activities, from money laundering and embezzlement to drug trafficking and prostitution. The Order provided cover for his misdeeds, shielding him from investigation and ensuring that any potential whistleblowers were silenced. Thornton's role as a corrupted councilman served the Order well, allowing them to maintain a stranglehold on the city's politics and economy. He was their eyes and ears in the corridors of power, reporting back on any potential threats or opportunities that might impact their operations. However, as Thornton's behavior grew more reckless and his vices began to spiral out of control, he became a liability to the Order. His frequent dalliances with drugs and prostitutes made him vulnerable to blackmail, and his sloppy financial dealings threatened to expose the Order's own involvement in his corruption. Despite the Order's best efforts to keep him in line, Thornton's self-destructive behavior finally caught up with him. His hands shook as he raised the glass of bourbon to his lips, the amber liquid sloshing against the sides. He could still taste the bitterness of the cocaine on his tongue, feel the rush of the high shooting through his veins. On the bed beside him, the prostitute stirred, her naked body tangled in the sheets. Thornton's stomach stirred with a mixture of desire and disgust, the same conflicting emotions that drove him to this shady motel room in the first place. He closed his eyes, memories flashing through his mind like a twisted highlight reel. The late nights at the office, the endless parties and fundraisers, the women who threw themselves at him with reckless abandon. He'd always been a man who craved more, who could never quite satisfy the gnawing hunger inside of him. Power, influence, sex, and drugs. They were all just different flavors of the same addictive cocktail, the one he couldn't seem to quit no matter how hard he tried. Each time he told himself it would be the last, that he would finally get his act together and be the man his constituents believed him to be. But then, the temptation would come calling again, and he would find himself right back where he started, caught in a cycle of weakness and desperation that he couldn't seem to break. Thornton's eyes snapped open as he heard the sound of sirens in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. His heart thudding in his chest. He glanced down at his trembling hands, realizing what he'd gotten himself into. He'd gone too far this time, let his appetites get the best of him in a moment of reckless abandon. And now, as the consequences of his actions bore down on him like a freight train, he knew his luck had finally run out. The door burst open, and a team of police officers swarmed the room, their weapons drawn. Thornton raised his hands in surrender, his eyes wide with fear and panic. "Councilman Michael Thornton, you're under arrest," one of the officers said. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As they led him out of one room and into another, a sense of numbness came over him, a dull acceptance of the fate that awaited him. He always knew his secrets would catch up with him one day, that the dark forces he aligned himself with would turn on him in the end. In the other room, the detectives grilled him, their voices sharp and accusing as they laid out the evidence against him. The prostitute, the drugs, the corruption and deceit that stretched back years. It was all there, laid bare for the world to see. But even in his desperation, Thornton clung to one last shred of hope, one final bargaining chip that could save him from the worst of the fallout. "I have information," he said, "about the Order, about the people behind all of this. I can give you names, dates, places. I can help you bring them down." The detectives exchanged a look, their eyes narrowing with suspicion and interest. They heard whispers of the Illuminated Order before, caught glimpses of the secret cabal that pulled the strings of power from behind the scenes. But they never had someone so close to the inner circle, someone with the knowledge and the access to bring the whole house of cards tumbling down. What Thornton didn't know, however, was that one of the detectives in the room, a man named Jack Castor, was himself a member of the Order. Castor rose through the ranks of law enforcement with the backing of his benefactors and used his position to protect and serve their interests at every turn. As he listened to Thornton's desperate pleas, Castor felt a cold fury growing in his gut, a sense of betrayal and disgust at the councilman's weakness and disloyalty. He had to act fast, had to contain the damage before Thornton could spill his secrets to the wrong people. With a nod to his partner, Castor stepped out of the room. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number that he committed to memory long ago, the direct line to one of the Order's highest-ranking members. "We have a problem," he said. "Thornton is talking, offering to spill everything he knows about the Order. We need to contain this. Fast. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, a pause that seemed to stretch out for an eternity. And then, with a voice that was as cold and unforgiving as the grave, the person on the other end spoke. Understood. Do what needs to be done. Thornton is now a liability, and we don't abide liabilities. The call ended with a click. Castor knew what those words meant, knew the terrible price that Thornton would pay for his betrayal. But he also knew he had no choice. His own survival depended on his loyalty to the Order. With a heavy heart, he stepped back into the room, ready to play his part in the dark drama that was about to unfold. Thornton looked up at him with desperate, pleading eyes, but Castor's expression was hard as stone, his eyes cold and pitiless. "I'm sorry, Councilman," he said, "but I'm afraid your information won't be enough to save you. You've crossed the wrong people, and now it's time to pay the price." Chapter 7. In a secluded corner of the city, Jade and David pored over the new information. The loud sounds outside seemed distant, muffled by the gravity of the moment. Their voices hushed and urgent. They began to plot their next move. The information they held could change everything, but they had to tread carefully. The wrong step could put them in danger, exposing their knowledge to those who would stop at nothing to keep it hidden. "We have to get more information about Bohemian Grove," Jade said. "Whatever they're planning, we need to bring it to the light." She scanned the area, ensuring they were alone. The temporary sanctuary provided them a moment to catch their breath and gather their thoughts. David considered their options, his mind working through the potential outcomes of each path they could take. "We're about to step into the lion's den, Jade, and Bohemian Grove is the beating heart of their twisted empire." The discovery of the secret meeting location left them both stunned. Huddled together in the confines of the office, Jade and David scrutinized maps and satellite imagery. Jade's fingers ghosted over the boundaries of Bohemian Grove, her touch delicate yet purposeful, as if trying to divine the secrets hidden within its borders. "This is where the most powerful figures in the Order convene," she said. "A place of secrets and influence." David leaned back in his chair. "It's a fortress of privilege, masked in exclusivity." Jade met his eyes, the intensity of their past fluctuating between them. "We've faced risks before, David. This time, the stakes are higher than ever." He reached out, his hand covering hers. "We're in this together, Jade, no matter what happens." She nodded, drawing strength from his touch. "I'm with you, but we need someone who understands the inner workings of the Order." David thought for a second. "Dr. Sophia Ramirez. She's our best bet. Her expertise on secret societies could be invaluable." Jade stood up, the determination in her eyes mirroring David's. "Then let's pay her a visit. We have a grove to infiltrate and secrets to uncover." As they gathered their materials, Jade and David knew they were about to embark on a dangerous journey, but the truth was worth the risk. With Dr. Ramirez's guidance and their own unbreakable bond, they were ready to face the heart of the Illuminated Order's darkness. Chapter 8. Dr. Sophia Ramirez, a woman of academic distinction and age-old wisdom, held court within the halls of academia. Her office, decorated with shelves laden with ancient tomes and manuscripts, served as a sanctuary for the pursuit of knowledge and the unraveling of mysteries that danced at the periphery of societal awareness. With a demeanor that blended scholarly precision and a quiet intensity, Dr. Ramirez possessed an aura of intellectual authority. Her silver hair framed a face that bore the lines of countless hours spent delving into the secrets of clandestine societies. Behind a pair of glasses that hinted at the depth of her insights, her eyes gleamed with a keen intelligence that seemed to pierce through the layers of hidden truths. As an expert in political science with a specialization in the study of secret societies and covert operations, Dr. Ramirez's reputation extended beyond the confines of her academic realm. She was sought after not only for her wealth of knowledge, but also for her ability to connect historical threads and shed light on the shadows cast by the powerful. Her attire, a subtle blend of professionalism and a hint of mystery, reflected a woman who moved seamlessly between the worlds of higher education and intrigue. A small gold owl pendant, an ancient symbol with roots lost in time, hung around her neck, a talisman that hinted at the depths of her understanding. In her interactions, Dr. Ramirez exuded a calm assurance that inspired confidence. Her words carried the weight of decades spent deciphering the cryptic languages of secret societies. But beneath the veneer of academic authority, there was passion, a commitment to discovering the truths obscured by the veils of power. Colleagues respected her insights, students revered her as a mentor, and those who sought the unraveling of secrets coveted her guidance. Dr. Sophia Ramirez, with her encyclopedic knowledge and intellect, was ready to guide Jade and David through the maze of the Illuminated Order's secrets. Jade and David stepped into Dr. Ramirez's office, a sanctuary of knowledge amidst the university. Towering bookcases lined the walls, filled with ancient tomes and obscure texts. The air was enveloped in the scent of aged leather and fresh brewed coffee. At the center of it all sat Dr. Ramirez, engrossed in a manuscript. She looked up as they entered, her stare piercing through the secrets they sought to unravel. "Jade Rose," she said, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. "I've been following your work. Tenacious, fearless, and driven by a hunger for truth that rivals my own." Jade blinked, taken aback by the perceptiveness of the woman before her. She glanced at David, who gave a subtle nod. They were in the right place. "Dr. Ramirez," Jade began, stepping forward, "we need your help. We've uncovered evidence of a secret society operating at the highest levels of power." The professor's eyes widened, recognition passing over her face. She gestured for them to sit. "Tell me everything." Jade wasted no time, placing the evidence on Dr. Ramirez's desk. "Bohemian Grove, the Illuminated Order's sanctuary. What can you tell us about this place, and how does it connect to the Order's influence?" Dr. Ramirez scanned the documents. "Bohemian Grove has a storied history, intertwined with the elites of society. It's more than just a gathering place. It's a nexus of power and influence. The Order's choice of such a location signifies a deliberate move to shape events beyond the public eye." She sat back in her chair, her eyes distant as if recalling the secrets she unearthed. "The Grove is divided into camps, each representing a facet of the Order's power structure. The Owl's Nest, the Cave, the Hilltop Lodge, each has its own hierarchy and its own rituals." David's jaw tightened. "We need to know what we're dealing with. The layout, the security, the key players." Dr. Ramirez nodded, reaching for a worn leather journal. "I've spent years piecing together fragments of the Order's history. Bohemian Grove is a puzzle, but there are patterns, clues to its inner workings." As the meeting stretched into the night, the trio pored over maps and documents. Jade and David's resolve grew stronger with each revelation, their determination fueled by the knowledge that they were on the cusp of exposing the truth. "The Order has always employed assassins to carry out its darkest deeds," she said. "From the days of the Hashashin in ancient Persia to the modern era, they've relied on these skilled killers to eliminate threats and maintain their grip on power." She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. "And now they have Elias Vale, a man whose reputation for brutality and efficiency is unmatched. He's the Order's most valuable asset, and their most closely guarded secret." Dr. Ramirez fixed them with a piercing gaze. "Remember, the Order's power lies in secrecy. The truth is your weapon. Wield it wisely, and the walls of Bohemian Grove will crumble." As Jade and David sat in Dr. Ramirez's office, the professor leaned back in her chair, a distant look in her eyes. "I've been fascinated by secret societies since I was a young girl," she said. "My grandfather used to tell me stories of the Freemasons and the Illuminati, whispered tales of power and intrigue that captured my imagination." She smiled ruefully. "When I lost him to cancer, I threw myself into my studies, determined to uncover the truth behind the myths. I spent years traveling the world, tracking down ancient texts and forgotten archives, piecing together the hidden history of these organizations. It became my life's work, my obsession." Dr. Ramirez's stare turned serious. "I'm not just helping you because of my academic curiosity," she said. "I have my own reasons for wanting to see the Illuminated Order exposed." She took a deep breath. Years ago, my mentor, a brilliant historian named Dr. James Smithfield, stumbled on evidence of the Order's existence. He became consumed by his research, determined to bring their secrets to light. But before he could go public with his findings, he disappeared without a trace. Her eyes glistened. I never found out what happened to him, but I've always suspected the Order had a hand in his disappearance. Helping you uncover the truth is my way of honoring his memory and finishing the work he started. As Jade and David listened to the professor, every so often, she would pause to adjust the small gold pendant that hung around her neck, her fingers tracing the intricate engravings with a tender reverence. Jade wondered about the story behind the necklace, sensing it held a deep personal significance for the professor. When Dr. Ramirez caught Jade staring, she smiled. "This was a gift from my grandmother," she said. "She said it would bring me luck and protect me from harm. I've worn it every day since, a little piece of her always close to my heart." Hidden in the ancient redwood forests of Monte Rio, California, Bohemian Grove emerged as a sanctuary veiled in the mists of secrecy and exclusivity. The sprawling 2,700-acre expanse, bearing the address 2601 Bohemian Avenue, stood as a testament to the enclave's storied existence. A hallowed ground belonging to the private gentlemen's club known as the Bohemian Club, Bohemian Grove exuded an air of mystique that transcended its tranquil surroundings. Founded with a vision that reflected through the corridors of time, Bohemian Grove traced its origins to a group of influential men seeking a retreat where they could escape the trappings of the ordinary world. Artists, musicians, businessmen, government officials, and former U.S. presidents converged within this redwood cathedral, the Bohemian Club's all-male membership forging bonds beneath the towering trees. Each year, in mid-July, Bohemian Grove transformed into a sphere shrouded in secrecy, hosting an encampment that spanned more than 2 weeks. A privileged few, along with their invited guests, explored a world detached from the mundane, where the club's motto, "Weaving spiders come not here," resonate through the ancient groves. Beyond the falsehood of camaraderie lay the shadows of power and the undercurrents of influence that could sway the course of nations. Notorious for its Manhattan Project planning meeting in September 1942, which laid the groundwork for the atomic bomb, Bohemian Grove became a nexus where power and secrecy converged. As the years passed, the Grove evolved, its significance growing as it became a symbol of privilege, influence, and the unspoken agreements forged within its secluded groves. The encampment became a rite of passage for the elite, and after 40 years of membership, individuals earned the revered Old Guard status, solidifying their position within the hierarchy. As the trio delved into the historical significance of Bohemian Grove and the potential implications of the Illuminated Order's presence, Dr. Ramirez provided insights that transcended mere academic knowledge. "You two are treading on slippery ground," she warned. "Bohemian Grove is a melting pot of influence, and those who seek to expose its secrets face powerful adversaries. But knowledge is your weapon, and understanding their methods is the key to unraveling the Order's web of deceit." As they stepped out into the cool night air, they thought hard about what Dr. Ramirez told them. They exchanged a glance and set forth, their footsteps carrying them towards the heart of the Illuminated Order's darkest secrets. Chapter 9. Jade and David maneuvered the small rowboat through the river's murky waters, the light from the moon guiding their path. The gentle splashing of the oars and the chirping of crickets were the only sounds that broke the silence of the night. Jade sat at the bow, scanning the shoreline for any sign of their destination. "We should be getting close. The intel said Bohemian Grove is just a few miles upstream." David nodded, his strong arms propelling the boat forward with steady strokes. "Let's hope the rumors are true," he said. "If the Order really is holding their meeting here, it could be our best chance to infiltrate their ranks and uncover their plans." Jade rested her hand on the small pouch hanging from her waist, the weight of the camera inside a comforting presence. It was their silent weapon, a tool that could expose the Order's secrets to the world. As they rounded a bend in the river, a faint glow appeared in the distance. David turned to Jade. "There, up ahead, that must be it." David slowed his strokes, the boat gliding quietly through the water. They exchanged a glance. Whatever awaited them, they would have to face it together. their bond stronger than any force the Order could muster. They crept through the forest surrounding Bohemian Grove. The moonlight filtered through the canopy, tossing shadows across the ground. As they approached the perimeter of the exclusive retreat, the distant sound of voices and the fizzling of a large fire tickled their ears. A beam of light cut through the darkness, and a gruff voice called out, "Halt! You're trespassing on private property. Keep your hands where I can see them," he said, gun in one hand, reaching for his walkie-talkie with the other. "We have a perimeter breach. Possible suspicious activity. Requesting backup. Requesting backup." Jade and David froze, their blood running cold as they realized they'd been spotted. They raised their hands in surrender as several security guards emerged from the trees. Despite their pleas and explanations, they found themselves handcuffed and escorted off the property. The local police station was a blur of questioning and paperwork before they were finally released with a stern warning. As they wandered through the nearby town, they approached several locals, hoping to gain some information about Bohemian Grove and the strange rituals rumored to take place there. The town nestled on the fringes of Bohemian Grove was a study in contrasts, a place where the ordinary and the extraordinary collided. The air was suffused with the scent of pine and redwood, mixed with the tang of smoke from the grove's nightly bonfires. The atmosphere was charged with an undercurrent of tension, a clear sign that something momentous was unfolding just beyond the reach of curious eyes. The streets were lined with shops and cafes. The locals moved about their daily lives with a practiced nonchalance, their smiles warm but guarded, as if they were privy to secrets they dared not share. They spoke in whispered tones, their eyes darting furtively towards the grove's perimeter, ever mindful of the powerful figures who gathered there. There was an energy to the town that was at once electric and subdued, a thrumming undercurrent of anticipation that set nerves on edge and hearts racing. The people here were no strangers to the weird and the extraordinary, living in the shadow of an enigma that long since become a part of their daily reality. They navigated the blurred lines between the mundane and the mystical with practiced ease, their lives forever intertwined with the fate of the grove and the secrets it held. As Jade and David walked the streets, they felt the weight of the town's history, the countless secrets and lies whispering on the breeze. The people they passed regarded them with a mix of curiosity and caution, their eyes filled with unspoken questions and warnings. In this place, where the veil between worlds seemed to wear thin, anything was possible, and the truth was often stranger than fiction. Most of the residents were tight-lipped, unwilling to discuss the secretive retreat. However, one elderly man beckoned them closer. He sat on a bench outside a small cafe, sipping a cup of coffee and watching the world go by with a knowing glint in his eye. Jade and David approached him with caution, not wanting to scare him off with too many direct questions. They struck up a casual conversation, asking about the town's history and the local attractions. The old man smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Folks round here tend to mind their own business, especially when it comes to the grove," he said, his voice low and conspiratorial. "Why is that?" Jade asked, keeping her tone light and friendly. "Them rich fellas, they got their own way of doing things, if you catch my drift." "Is there something unusual about the grove?" The old man chuckled, shaking his head. "Unusual doesn't even begin to cover it," he said. "Strange things happen up there, or so they say. Rituals and such. But you didn't hear that from me, you understand?" David exchanged a glance with Jade, his interest clearly piqued as well. "What kind of rituals?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. The old man shrugged, taking another sip of his coffee. "Who knows for sure? Some say they worship ancient gods, make sacrifices and whatnot. Others say it's just a bunch of rich folks playing dress-up and getting up to no good." He paused, his eyes growing distant as if lost in thought. "But there is one thing I've heard, something that always stuck with me. They say on the last night of the gathering, they burn an effigy in a big old bonfire. Some kind of symbolic thing, supposed to represent casting off the cares of the world or some such nonsense." Jade and David listened to the old man's words. They couldn't take everything he said at face value, but the mention of the effigy burning was too specific to ignore. They thanked the old man for his time and bought him another cup of coffee before leaving, their heads buzzing with new questions and theories. As they walked back, Jade turned to David. The effigy burning ritual seems significant, she said. That has to mean something. It's too specific to be just a random rumor. David nodded, his own mind working overtime to piece together the clues. Agreed. The old man's intel lines up with some of the documents I've seen. It's a lead worth pursuing. We should cross-reference it against the historical records and see if any patterns emerge. Even the smallest detail could crack this case wide open. They climbed into a cab, their determination renewed by the glimpse of the truth the old man provided. They still had a long way to go, but every scrap of information, no matter how small or insignificant, brought them one step closer to unraveling the secrets of Bohemian Grove and the Illuminated Order's dark agenda. Chapter 10. In her office, where the secrets were about to be unveiled, Jade leaned forward, her eyes fixed on David Montgomery. The atmosphere was tinged with anticipation as David, the former government operative haunted by his past, prepared to unravel the guarded mysteries. Seated in front of an array of computer screens and classified documents, David's eyes held a steely resolve. His voice, measured and laden with the weight of disclosure, cut through the silence. The Illuminated Order, he began, is not just a name. It's a secret force that weaves its influence through the corridors of power. As he spoke, images flashed on the screens, symbols, encrypted messages, and glimpses of powerful figures obscured in the shadows. Founded centuries ago, David continued, by three individuals whose ambitions transcended the ordinary. Lord Alexander Hawthorne, a wealthy aristocrat with a vision. Lady Amelia Sinclair, a brilliant intellectual and socialite. And Sir Edward Blackwell, a seasoned military commander. Jade absorbed every word, and David pressed on, delving into the inner workings of the Order. Within the Order's hierarchy, there's the inner circle, Baroness Isabella Devereux, a shrewd businesswoman managing the vast wealth, Dr. Marcus Bennett, a brilliant scientist developing advanced technology, and Madame Celeste Duval, a master of espionage and deception. The images shifted, revealing faces and roles that painted a vivid picture of the Order's power structure. And then there's the High Council, David continued. Lord Sebastian Monroe, a charismatic politician, Lady Eleanor Worthington, a renowned philanthropist, and Sir William Hastings, a ruthless enforcer and tactician. Jade's mind raced, trying to connect the dots. But there's more, David added, lowering his voice. Junior members like Miss Victoria Sterling, manipulating financial markets, Mr. Jameson Shaw, a brilliant hacker and cyber warfare expert, and Ms. Cassandra Blackwell, Sir Edward Blackwell's great-great-granddaughter, a skilled diplomat forging global alliances. The room seemed to close in as David's knowledge unraveled the intricate web of the Illuminated Order. And then there's Senator Jonathan Bishop, he concluded, charismatic in public, but a high-ranking member within the Order using political influence to further its agenda. David pointed to an image of an owl. The owl. It keeps appearing in these texts, always in connection with the Order. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but the more I studied their history and symbolism, the more I realized it was a deliberate choice. But why an owl? What does it represent? In many ancient cultures, the owl was seen as a symbol of wisdom, knowledge, and insight. It was believed to have the ability to see through the darkness, to perceive truths that were hidden from ordinary sight. He stared at the owl on the screen. But there was also a darker side to the owl's symbolism. In some traditions, it was associated with death, with the underworld and the forces of darkness. It was seen as a vessel of doom, a messenger of the gods that brought tidings of sorrow and despair. As the weight of the information settled, Jade and David exchanged a knowing look. The journey to expose the Illuminated Order's secrets had only just begun, and the road ahead promised treacherous twists and turns. The shadows of power cast by the Order loomed large, and Jade felt the gravity of the path she'd chosen. A path that would lead them into the heart of darkness,